Everybody, and welcome to this Forum Europe Under the Spotlight debate on the Green Deal and the Recovery Plan. My name is James Wilmot, and it's my pleasure to welcome so many of you to this discussion today. We've actually been overwhelmed with interest in this event, but we certainly don't take for granted the time that you're putting aside to participate. So thank you and welcome once again. This event is being streamed to our Twitter account, which is @Forum Europe, and the hashtag is Green Deal Online. It's also available on our YouTube account, so hello to everyone following this discussion on our social media sites. So today's debate is structured into three parts. For those of you registered and joining the platform, you're currently viewing this in the stage area. This is where we will shortly hear a round of interventions from our listed speakers. Before moving on to our panel discussion, where Paul Adamson, Forum Europe's chairman, will gently interrogate our speakers for around 30 minutes or so. You will have noticed that on the right-hand side of your screen, you have the ability to post comments and questions. So I'd encourage you to utilize this, and Paul will do his very best to include as many of these in the discussion as possible. And once Paul has brought this discussion to a close, so not yet, but after the panel, you should navigate to the Sessions tab on the left-hand side of your screen. And this is where you'll find the Have Your Say session, where we have a number of stakeholders lined up to react to what they will have heard so far. And well, at that point, I should say. And this, however, is also your opportunity to get involved. So when you join the Have Your Say session as a participant, you have the option to watch, and if you're feeling compelled to do so, request to be brought up onto screen to pose your question or remarks. The session is actually specifically designed for this purpose, so I'd encourage you to intervene and to make those requests to intervene as early as possible. You'll also notice that we have some polls running during the discussions. So again, please do submit your views there. And as I say, if you have any questions for the speakers or would like any support in using the platform, you can use the chat function on the right-hand side, and colleagues are ready and available to provide any support that might be necessary. So I'll conclude now, and I'll hand over to Paul, but I'll see everyone a little later, around 11:40 in the Have Your Say session, where I'll explain a little bit more about the networking opportunities you can utilize while on the platform. So over to you, Paul, and once again, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you, James, and I would like to offer also my own warm welcome to everyone joining us here today. We have around 1,000 people registered for this event, and many more still watching via social media channels, as James indicated. And I'm reliably informed that we have guests from Chile, India, Brazil, Japan, South Africa, and many other countries around the world joining. So this will truly be a global conversation. From the outset, the European Green Deal has been presented as the flagship policy of the von der Leyen Commission, with the president calling it the motor of our recovery, quote unquote. In other words, a growth strategy as much as an environment strategy. And with the announcement 2 days ago of the EU recovery package, the Commission has reaffirmed its ambition to achieve the European Green Deal. And it clearly now sits at the heart of the efforts to move Europe out of the crisis. The European Green Deal has now become most definitely a very big deal. Reception to the plan has been largely positive, with of course nuance and criticism, as you might expect. So today we will modestly attempt to work through the headline issues that have emerged this week. And as James has already indicated, a large part of the effort will feature on your input, both through the chat function on the right of your screen, but also in the Have Your Say session, which will start around 11:40 in the Sessions tab. So to help us examine the recovery plan proposals and to assess how green the plan will ultimately emerge to be, we are fortunate to have a stellar lineup of experts. And I'm pleased to welcome Daniel Calleja Crespo, the Director General of DG Environment at the European Commission, and before that, Director General of DG Grow, or DG Enterprise, I think it was called in those days. Miapetra Kumpula-Natri, who's been a member of the European Parliament since 2014, sits in the Socialists and Democrats group, and is one of the most active MEPs in the current legislature. Terhi Lehtonen, State Secretary in the Finnish Ministry of Environment, who has also previously worked on climate issues in the European Commission, and was for many years an advisor to the Green Group in the European Parliament. Abraham Liu, Chief Representative to the EU institutions and Vice President of the European region at Huawei, who brings the digital and technology angle to this discussion. and Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, co-president of the Club of Rome, who I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will already know is one of the most eloquent and enthusiastic climate proponents and is a fixture in the debate on Europe's shift to lower carbon economies. We will hear from each of our speakers for their initial interventions, and then we will move on to the panel where I will engage in a discussion with all of them together. I know that Mia Petra has to leave after her remarks because of urgent Parliament business, so we do appreciate all the speakers taking the time to be with us here this morning. So without further ado from me, I hand over to Daniel for your opening remarks, and welcome, Daniel.
Good morning, and it is a real pleasure to participate virtually in this global conversation. I am impressed by the number of colleagues registered and by the global outreach. And of course, I would like to start with a big word of thanks to my good friend Paul Adamson for his invitation. We know each other for many years, and I have always appreciated his savoir-faire in terms of communication and in getting the messages right to the European institutions. So I appreciate very much the opportunity to have this exchange. I think today's event could not be more timely for three reasons. First of all, we are completing the first 6 months of the von der Leyen Commission, which took office on the 1st of November. Second, we have now been for more than 75 days fighting an unknown virus, which has caused a major health disruption across the world and which has put us in a situation which no one could expect. And this event takes place only 2 days after the European Commission unveiled its proposals to ensure the economic and social recovery in post-corona times. Once we defeat the virus, once we come to what is called now the new normality, what are the policies, what are the measures that will have to be put in place, and what are the financing mechanisms for that effect. But I would like to start at the beginning, and at the beginning I would like to recall that when President von der Leyen took office at the beginning of her mandate, and she outlined what would be her key priorities, she mentioned 6. And of course, she mentioned the digital agenda, she mentioned a stronger European economy, a stronger promotion of European values, a more democratic EU closer to its citizens, a Europe that is stronger in the world, more global, more geopolitical. But there was one priority which surprised everybody, and it is when she said, I will propose a European Green Deal. And Paul was rightly saying this was named one of the flagships of her mandate. And she said, I will do it in the first 100 days of my mandate. Well, the European Green Deal was tabled in the first 11 days of her mandate, showing her determination. She made us work very hard. It didn't happen only in 11 days. We had been working before. But I think this is a new agenda. It's Europe's growth agenda. At the same time, it's Europe's bet for sustainability, for fight against climate change. It is a new transformative set of proposals to change our economies, our societies, our social systems, and to do this in a proper, sustainable way. Now, what is the European Green Deal? I have one slide which explains it all, because one image is better than 1,000 words, we say in Spanish. So I am sure, Mike, this is in a nutshell what is the European Green Deal: transforming the EU's economy for a sustainable future, and doing it around some key elements. We want to be the first climate neutral region in the world by 2050. This is on the left-hand side at the top. So Europe wants to decarbonize its economy by 2050 with targets for 2030, with a very, very strong determination to fight climate change and to lead in this area. We want also to lead in the supply and delivery of clean, affordable, and secure energy. We want to mobilize our industry for a clean and circular economy, moving from the old linear model of produce, consume, and throw away, and making sure that we close the loop and that we go through innovation for a more balanced and a more effective economic system. We want to be the most resource efficient region in the world because we don't have unlimited energy or raw materials, and we think it is possible to go for the circular economy, which will bring savings, make our companies more competitive, and reduce the pollution. There will have to be, the construction sector will be a key role. Renovation, building SMEs, energy efficiency, this can play a big role in decarbonizing the economy, at the same time making jobs and growth. There is a zero pollution ambition. The water we drink, the air we breathe, the industrial emissions, the soils. This can increase dramatically the quality of life of European citizens and bring economic opportunities. And we need to restore our ecosystems and biodiversity. This is the other side of the coin of climate change. Halting the degradation of biodiversity and restoring nature is also a very important economic investment. Investment in nature is the most profitable investment you can make because you are investing in the planet. And at the same time, we also want to change our food system to make it more sustainable. The biodiversity and farm to fork initiatives were tabled on the 20th of May, 1 week ago, and the circular economy proposal was also tabled in the month of March, as well as the EU climate ambition, which was tabled during the first 100 days. Last but not least, we need to shift to sustainable and smart mobility. And we need to do this with two imperatives. One, there have to be sufficient means to finance this, and we need to do it in a fair way. This is why we have to ensure that we leave no one behind, that we have a just transition fund, which should cater for skills, for building the capacities to have this just transition. Of course, you don't see it very well, but on the top of the screen, it should be in blue in the center, but it has moved a little bit on the right-hand side. The role of research and innovation will be crucial. If we are able to put this agenda in place, Europe will be a global leader because our companies will have the competitive advantage of delivering the standards of the future linked to this green economy, where we see great opportunities. And we want to do it through a European climate pact to bring in the cities, to bring in the regions, to bring in also the global dimension, working also with third countries, working with civil society in an inclusive way. So this is the European Green Deal. Now, many people have said, well, after the virus, surely all this ambitious agenda may now, is this going to be central, or is it going to be put aside because the COVID-19 has created a health crisis, but also a deep economic and social crisis? Well, I would like to recall what President von der Leyen has said, and she has said that the European Green Deal, and it has not been herself only, she got the endorsement of the leaders of the European Council, the heads of state and government, who said the recovery has to be based on the digital agenda and on the green economy. And the European Green Deal remains very much at the heart of the European agenda. Only 2 days ago, and this is my next and final slide, the Commission adopted a landmark, I think it's a historical step, for two reasons. First of all, because of the scale of the funds involved. We had to adopt during the crisis an emergency package for 540 billion. This is already in place, sure, to take care of temporary problems of loss of jobs. It's a 100 billion euros response mechanism. Then the ESM pandemic crisis support, the European Stability Mechanism, to allow countries to be able to intervene, and the EIB Guarantee Fund for workers and business. This had already been the first response. We were discussing with the member states the multi-annual financial framework, 1.1 billion. But what the Commission decided 2 days ago was to review the multi-annual financial framework, to reinforce the programs and to accommodate them to the new situation. And at the same time, a new instrument, which is the Next Generation EU, 750 billion euros of temporary reinforcement through grants and loans, increasing the threshold for expenditure of the EU so that we will, for the first time, beyond the 1.1 billion, we will be going to the markets to secure financing with the guarantee of the EU budget to allow us to deploy our policies. Policies in the green, policies in the digital area, and policies to promote circular economy, to bring back the recovery that Europe needs. Final message on my side. Why is this so? First of all, because we increasingly see the links between health and the environment. We cannot afford to go backwards. We see that investing in the environment is also a good investment for our health. And when we see the degradation of nature and the connections, the pressure on resources, on natural resources, that has had an impact in spreading viruses from the animal world, zoonosis, into the human world, this is clearly, we need the recovery to be green, to be sustainable. We need to avoid investing in industries of the past and going backwards and losing the possibilities of the sustainable development. We have to mobilize investment to facilitate the transition. And we believe that by doing so, our companies will be stronger, they will be more competitive, they will pollute less, and we will reduce our emissions. So there's a win-win for the economy, also for the environment, for our planet, and also for our society. The European Green Deal will be at the heart of the European Union's recovery strategy. And the mandate of this Commission in the remaining part will be focused on making sure that we deliver it with the policies, but that we deliver it with the financial means, with the ambitious proposals that we have put forward, and on which we seek now the approval of the European Parliament and of the European Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Daniel. That's an extremely informative and helpful overview of the current situation, especially as so much of this is breaking news. I now move very quickly on to, given her schedule, Mia Petra. Over to you, Mia Petra.
Hello and greetings from Finland. I'm working full-time on my parliamentary duties online since 2 months now. The COVID-19 was a major shock for Europe and the global health problems and then the economies. It is the shock how we feel on a security concerning our own health, but nowadays also our economic security and feelings. Many have lost their jobs and many unfortunately will in coming months. The global fight against the virus will then continue also the global fight against the economical collapse. For comparison, US fiscal stimulus amounts to 3 trillion. So we need to make big and sizable efforts in EU as well. As size is important, I see the way we target it and in order to make sure that European economy becomes clean, digital and competitive in the future, the aim remains. I'm happy about the Commission proposal that its direction pointing to a good direction. Of course, the details remains to be discussed in the future weeks and months. There is a strong needed coordinated recovery response in the EU level. We know that. It has been said that the current crisis has been beneficial for climate. Yes, it is true that the virus crisis time and restriction measures related to that has cut the global emissions. IEA expects global industrial greenhouse gas emission to lower 8% this year. The drop is huge and there has not been anything like that since the Second World War. But I don't find this is really important in the terms of the transition to clean economy, because as the economy recovers, maybe slowly or faster, the emission will increase again, unless we have the courage to take the strong and right actions to make our economic model different. The Commission proposal on the Green Deal has an ambitious goal in terms of the climate change mitigation, biodiversity, and circular economy. I think we need to place the Green Deal in the heart of the recovery plan, and I'm glad that that was the response of the Commission as well. The Parliament has been very ambitious on its standing points as well. The proposal also includes financing and grants and loans to make the green recovery possible. COVID crisis has hit all the businesses, we could say. Especially small and medium-sized businesses are struggling. It is clear that support is needed fast, and there's no time to waste. Otherwise, Europe will be facing a long period of low growth and high employment. And I must say that just transition now is more important than ever. We cannot leave those people facing unemployment or losing the businesses behind. The only way Green Deal can succeed and be supported by the people is the just transition. I see Commission's proposal raise funding for the transition was warmly welcomed in the Parliament as well. Governments need to support businesses in the crisis, but I believe we need to target the support that climate goals go hand in hand with the green recovery. The question is now, do we say that on the European level? Do we say it on the member state level, or also on the business grants and loans? I think state aid to businesses should include so-called climate conditions. By saying this, I mean that there would be required that business that receives support should commit to reducing emissions, changing their business models to circular economy, or have proper plans so that the future is also competitive for them and it is climate friendly. I think there is no point of investing in old CO2 intensive sectors if these sectors just cannot change their business models. Soon, stranded assets in our hands would mean wasted public money. In this case, retraining of employees and finding new business models to create jobs in the clean economy is needed and needs support. Qualified employees are very much needed. For example, ILO estimated that in 2030, the low carbon transition could increase jobs in EU by 2 million compared to the business as usual case. I think this is the potential shifting European know-how and skills to new level. This is the way we can, for example, promote the shift, for example, the steel industry towards green steel. And when our industries make costly changes in their business models, we need to protect them for the unfair international competition. Otherwise, we might end up not having own or green steel or own industry, but other heavy industries instead become reliant on imports of more CO2 intensive steel and other products from places that are more polluting plants and countries who not cut their emissions. That's why I think the carbon border adjustment mechanism is a vital part of the Green Deal. I must say that I work in the ITRE committee, mostly on energy and research and digitalization, but I'm eagerly finding, as a new INTA members on the committee for the trade, the EU new rules setting for high standards on the open but rule-based trade system in the world. So there is a crucial green part in our new future trade politics. So in addition to retraining of employees, we need to make sure that Europe doesn't lag behind in research and innovation on clean technologies. Just to give one concrete example, batteries. We do use batteries, we import batteries, but mostly old-fashioned. You cannot easily take part as the circular economy or recycle. You have to crush them. There could be new batteries which are designed to be recyclable. They could be sourced from the sustainable when related to the human rights. We can see that the supply chain supports circular targets and sustainable manner, both on the working condition and then the climate way. And we know the increase of use of batteries is huge. So why to lean only for the old-fashioned way produced batteries? We can create ecosystems in Europe as well, which respond to the future needs. So when we invest to the development and innovations in the European batteries ecosystems around the industry, then we also support the climate targets. Funds on that research and innovations all in all are very important now, I would say more important than before the crisis. We need to intensify emission cuts and circular economy principles in all sectors. The potential is some sector greater than the others, and I see one of them being the building sectors. The building sector is one of those with a great potential I see, because they would create the local jobs, it will help our cut to emissions, and it will improve the quality of living, which is important for all the Europeans. So the ideas around the renovation wave are good, and also the ideas published by Commission to finance that is very great. I welcome Commission's proposal and wait for the good proposal. Actually, what I'm leaving after this speech is we are having the Parliament INI report on the energy efficiency in the European building stock. I'm a shadow rapporteur and I worked on the EPBD, the Energy Performance Directive last mandate too. So when creating jobs, when doing the things better, there is win-win-win situation on the renovation wave. Also, investments in the clean infrastructure to support the transition needs to be part of the recovery. This could mean investments to the clean transport and in power grids and smart grids and energy efficient programs. I was also the shadow on the Connected European Facility. The regulation is almost ready, waits for the financial framework to become, and I sent greetings also here from the Parliament. We need very fast rechecking of the 10E regulation to be proper on time and answer the needs for the transition. And also investments in the digital infrastructure, including software, fiber, wireless networks are crucial as they support our ways to work distance, less need to travel. They help the circular economy and industrial efficiency, to name a few. To promote CO2-free energy, we should use carbon prices to promote the competitiveness of existing CO2-free energy. We should use carbon prices to promote the competitiveness of existing and new carbon-free energy and prevent potential adverse impacts of low fossil fuels prices. Income can be also used to finance green recovery. Extension of ETS into the new sectors could all act as a new own resource in the EU as proposed on the Commission. And also we remember the plastics and so also the income side is important. I don't have time to go deeper on that, but I wish you have some discussion on this important topic, how also the finance the needed recovery with the climate friendly ideas. So what this crisis has shown is that the way we run the economy will change, but it also can be changed the way we want it to be in the future. There has been huge leap into digital services, new working habits, and way we do business. I believe that there is a political will and courage, so we can take a giant leap in the transition towards the green economy. So I would conclude here, from Parliament with love, we are on board for the clean, just transition. And I apologize, there is somebody working next door on the renovation. So I need to also take that happily, this noise that the renovation is happening in my neighborhood.
Well, thank you very much, Mia Petrova. As long as it's green renovation, we don't mind so much, obviously. You managed to put a huge amount of substance into your speaking time, so thank you very much for that. It's also great to hear that the Parliament, the European Parliament, is fully functioning, even if it is remotely fully functioning. Thank you again for your time. I know you have to leave us, but again, thank you very much for being with us. Without further ado, I now move to Terry. Terry, are you there? Are you ready to speak? Yeah, we can hear you.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks for the opportunity to participate in today's webinar. It is a pleasure to join this distinguished panel to discuss about the recovery plan for Europe. To start, please allow me to pause for a moment to reflect upon the incredible rupture to our normal life this pandemic has brought. In a matter of weeks, it has closed down our economies, confined our people to their homes, split the elderly from the rest of society, closed our borders. It has exhausted many countries' healthcare resources, and an incredible number of lives have been lost. In the face of necessity, people have adjusted. Governments, cities, health authorities, doctors and nurses have risen to the challenge and have managed to get the virus, if not under control, under check. When there is a will, there is a way. The virus has also put our economies on life support. Member states' governments have stepped in with fiscal measures to keep companies and workers afloat, but it's clear that the EU needs to step in for the reconstruction, also to level the playing field. Member states have all been hit, but in different ways and with a varying capability to act. At the same time, and you all know this very well, while the corona crisis is occupying our government agendas, the climate and biodiversity emergencies have not disappeared. In the middle of this unprecedented, devastating crisis, it is vital to see both near and far, the immediate as well as the future needs. Designing our recovery to accelerate investments that take Europe towards sustainability in line with the planetary boundaries is the only right way forward. A green recovery from the corona crisis is a unique opportunity, perhaps even the last opportunity we will get. Whether it's a question of €1 or 1 billion, it can only be used once, and we must make sure we use public resources wisely, solving as many crises as we can. The good news is that we already have the plan on what needs to be done in the European Green Deal that was so eloquently presented by Daniel earlier. Green investments have also been recognized to be very effective in stimulating economies to recover. My government identified this opportunity early on and has collectively committed to designing recovery in line with the climate neutrality and circular economy goals. An advisory group on sustainable recovery set up by the Environment and Climate Minister Krista Mikkonen has already recommended a long list of measures that are ready for immediate implementation, would create significant economic stimulus and jobs, and they will work for climate and nature. The group has also developed a methodology for assessing sustainability of recovery measures, which we are also happy to share for wider use if there's interest. Now, I was very pleased that this same spirit is also reflected in the Commission's communication from Wednesday. It strongly builds on the Green Deal and the need to press fast forward on the green and digital transitions. As my government is still in the process of assessing the plan, I will not comment on the political sensitive questions of share grants or loans or the overall size of the instrument, but I have a few observations on the priorities and the conditions. The focus on greening and digital transformation is the right way forward. These investments will help Europe leap forward at the same time as reviving the economy from the corona shock. We must build back better and greener, look near and far at the same time. I also think that the idea of paying back the exceptional one-off corona recovery investment, at least partially, through new EU-level budgetary resources based on the polluter pays principle, linked to greenhouse gas emissions and non-recycled plastic like proposed by the Commission, is an attractive one. Doing this would further increase drivers to accelerate the transition to a climate neutral circular economy. In respect of the funding not directly dedicated to climate action, the do no harm safeguard must be fully respected. Public investments in the recovery must under no circumstances undermine or harm climate and environmental protection. And one final observation, not directly linked to the recovery instrument, but important and something that Mia Petra already also raised. While it makes sense to use public funds and recovery euros to support first movers and new technologies. In order to make climate and resource smart the new normal, we must not lose sight of the economic drivers. The carbon price and policies to reward circular economy solutions must be maintained and reinforced to ensure market signals sustain the transition. To conclude, the pandemic has shown that society can change and adapt faster than we thought. The transition to a climate neutral circular economy in a manner that is just and socially balanced is also possible. It needs to be facilitated by adequate incentives and support, such as the recovery instrument, taking into account the diversity of circumstances in the various regions of the Union. If we are able to come together in solidarity as the EU to rebuild from this crisis together, tackling the planetary emergencies at the same time, we will all come out stronger, both member states and the Union. And we will be able to lead the way forward for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Terry. Bang on time as well, which I'm very grateful for. And now turn to Abraham. Over to you, sir, to tell us about the digital contribution to this debate.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Since Huawei is operating globally in 170 countries, myself, I have been working in Africa for 9 years, Asia Pacific 6 years, and Europe now is 2 years, 30 years. So we understand that the global challenge, like the global, the climate change or the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the artificial geopolitical confliction has a major impact. This kind of common challenge, has a major impact to everyone. It has to be solved in the global coordinated manners. So today, I'd like to take this opportunity to share from Huawei's angle as an industrial player in the ICT industry, how we look at, this kind of challenge and how the technology, especially the digital technology, could address or help to address this issue. I have to be clear that, inspired the announcement of the European Commission's 750 billion euros economic recovery plan is really inspiring, and the industrial players like Huawei, it's not only because of this huge amount of money, but also they have clearly mentioned that the digital technology and the Green Deal should, is like twins. It has to play together. I think that is very much aligned with what we recognize or think in this industry side. And the first point I want to share with you is the ICT industry itself. We are, one of the heaviest research and development investor in across many industry, and we understand, this industry itself has to, contribute its own part for the Green Deal. So the energy efficient ICT means the ICT sector has to be a leader by example to become greener. So by 2025, carbon emission of the ICT industry per connection will drop by 80%, of 2015 level. That is according to the GIV report from Huawei. And we are very proud that the highly energy saving 5G technology, will contribute to the next generation of connectivity itself to be greener. In average, the 5G base station is going to be smaller, and Huawei is, thanks to our thermal scientists, the size of equipment becomes much smaller, and it's and consumes less energy, and furthermore, the transportation, and the other costs, will be also greatly solved. And in the future, the ICT industry will still continue to be the pioneer in the carbon emission reduction and the energy saving, facilitating to achieve a net zero target. That is, I think, we call the other ICT industry players to follow us as well, to make such an effort, to make ICT industry as a good example of a greener industry. And secondly, I want to say that the digital technology actually can play a key role of enable the other industry to be greener. Let's take the electricity supply as an example. A few years ago in UK, we worked with Vodafone to provide a connected, electricity meter. Not only collect all this information by wireless, instead of sending people to get all this information, but also help the electricity company to have a comprehensive statistic of the usage of the electricity. So optimize the resources alignment. That also save in a way the energy. So there's the smart meters with the sensors, the comprehensive connectivity, and so on and so forth. So that's just an example, but a lot more example can be given in the transportation industry. Like the city where my headquarters is located in Shenzhen, they have implemented a kind of smart transportation system with this kind of sensors and cameras, so that the traffic can be monitored and optimized, the red light or green light by the AI. So by monitoring the traffic jam, the situation, they optimize the traffic light, so that the traffic jam has been decreased by 15%, not representing a lot of carbon emission. And if you look in the future, some of the scientists are working with the airplanes industry. They are discussing about take off all these communication cables inside one airplane, which in average, let's say like Airbus A320 as an example, is more than 10 to 17 tons of cables can be removed from those airplanes. And this kind of potential is very substantial, and not every tons of weight removed from the airplane representing a much less a lot of CO2 emission can be deducted. And there are so many factors. I think the industries can leverage on the digital technology on their Green Deal agenda. And apart from this, I want to add one more point: is the global challenge, Green Deal, like climate change, the pandemic, and those kind of geopolitical uncertainty has to be handled or in a global coordinated way. So the globalization is not the source of many problem. It's actually the result. And I think instead of try to make the effort to have every industry to be more clustered or isolated, it's better. We really call for the global players, especially in European Union, to take the role of a leading role of emphasizing the global coordination, inviting the other key players like the China or the other players to join a new normal of global governance to address those kind of the global situation, because by disrupting the supply chain, or isolate certain players, we will not only be practical, but also will be proven not economic as well. So I want to end my speech by emphasizing, to support all this Green Deal in the ICT sector. Infrastructure is key. So I want to say, if I have to point out three things to emphasize, is connectivity, and connectivity. Of course, when Europe is deploying, enhancing its ICT infrastructures, the connectivity has to consider the inclusiveness, especially those area in the rural area. So leave nobody behind there, and make the green consideration and also a security. To have the full secure network is a precondition of the digital economy and also the digitalized Green Deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abraham. I now turn to Sandrine. Sandrine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I will try to stick to the 5 minutes that were allocated to me now that we seem to be well over time. So why don't I start by saying that if we're going to look at this, let's look at 3 key C's, which have been brought up actually by everyone. One is convergence. We have a convergence of tipping points. And at the Club of Rome, basically, we've been talking about the fact that we were going to have crises for 50 years. We now have one pandemic, which has been part of a series of pandemics, but the only reason why we're paying attention is because the entire globe is actually being hit, and in particular developed economies as well as developing economies. So let's look at convergence. If we look at the tipping points in convergence, we then need to think about design. The fact is right now we're reacting to disaster. We've got the greatest transformation we've ever seen has been mentioned by Thierry. We need to learn from that transformation. The greatest thing is that going into COVID, we had the Green Deal, the largest Marshall Plan for Europe, which was already establishing a package of both environmental and social legislation. The fact that the president yesterday had the courage to come forward and listen to NGOs and those member states who believed that we needed a level of conditionality and make whatever recovery we have conditional on both Paris Agreement goals, our climate neutrality goals, and the Green Deal was fundamental. What experts are saying, I've been on 3 panels this week. This is my 4th. I started with the power sector, right? 4 CEOs in the power sector, all saying that the recovery had to be anchored in the Green Deal, all saying that we couldn't stop the original investments that we started for decarbonization, all saying that it is tough. Okay, this is complex. The pricing issue is going to be an issue. We need to cost externalities across our energy sector, across our resource sector, in order to start to put a value on what matters. But we've already started this process and we cannot go back to business as usual. The next key point that I would like to make, which is the second C, is the connectivity. But the connectivity point is not just about digitalization. It's about thinking about people, planet, and profits together. Prosperity rather than profits, I would even say. That connectivity is about a nexus that needs to look at people first. And as we come out of COVID, we cannot, as environmentalists, and I consider myself to be one, as Thierry is, and we've worked for many years together, we cannot say that this is only an environmental crisis. This is the convergence of an environmental crisis where we've talked about humanity overstepping the planetary boundaries with a health crisis that hits everyone. So people at the center means that it needs to be connected to planet and prosperity, which means that if we're going to look at implementation, member states need to be able to speak to their citizens with a clear investment plan that is being supported by the European Union, as we see now in terms of the 1.85 trillion, but also through the European Central Bank, which needs to come forward and continue to support the EIB, European Investment Bank, that initially already made a pledge to pull out of oil and gas, but continue to support decarbonization and even smaller projects through renovation, energy efficiency, etc. And then, of course, the Just Transition funds and other funds that are going to ensure that those member states, those companies and industries that are the most hit by the transition can actually move forward. So that is the second C. But in order for both of those to work, what do we need? A third C, which is collaboration. The only way that we are going to make this work post-COVID with the greatest radical collaboration we've ever seen. That means both top-down and bottom-up approaches. That means that new economic models, like we're seeing through the well-being model that has been promoted by one of our members, Kate Rayworth, already implemented in Amsterdam, which takes those people, planet, and prosperity directly into the core of economic well-being. can actually be applied across Europe, where local communities are linked up through the connectivity that Abraham just spoke about, but also are linked up through food security, rural corridors with urban corridors, ensuring that actually we are bringing forward the most essential out of this COVID crisis into practice, so that when people actually go back to business as usual, it's not business as usual. It's even better than business as usual, because we talk about building back better. That is the motto: bouncing forward, learning from COVID, using the incredible recovery plan that we now have with its conditionality and the Green Deal to structure a new economy for Europe, which is going to show leadership to the rest of the world. And I'll finish there.
Very concise and precise. Thank you very much, Sandrine. Hope you all heard that. I'm unmuted. Fine. Right. When I go to questions, I'm going to ask each of the panel on the screen a brief question each. Before I do that, I will just quickly announce the results of the poll we did, if I can see the figures. Maybe somebody put the figures back on the screen for me so I can see them. They were just disappeared. We asked Rebecca, could you put the figures back on for me about the results of the poll? There, I see, thank you. So we asked the question: the recovery package provisions announced 27th of May fully place the Green Deal as our motor for the recovery. Do you agree this is the right approach? 38% strongly agree, 36% somewhat agree, so that's 74%. Together, neither agree nor disagree, 9%, somewhat disagree, 13%, and strongly disagree, 4%. Okay, I promised people were watching, maybe not every single person watching, some time to ask your questions. I'm going to ask a question first to Daniel, and I'll also weave in a question we received also from Marcus Trilling from the Coordinator Climate Action Network as well. My question first, then Marcus, is for you, Daniel, is that I can make these things clear for me. I can see that the recovery plan is a huge boost to the Green Deal, even if it didn't need a boost. It's obviously got a huge financial, political impetus behind it now. I just wondered, though, that given the fact that there's less conditionality maybe sometimes in some aspects in the giving out of the funds from this recovery program compared to the Green Deal focus, that although it might seem like a great boon to have the recovery plan underpinning the Green Deal objectives, at the same time, it kind of muddies the waters to a certain extent. And the question from Marcus Trilling from PAN is his question, I quote, out of 1.850 billion euros recovery funding, only 40 billion, the Just Transition Fund, require planning for climate neutrality. How is this in line with the Green Deal? Also, a question from Pedro Rodrigues Duarte from legal counsel at the Portuguese Perm Rep to all panels, but I'll start with Daniel. Isn't there a risk that the European Green Deal becomes a mantra instead of a public policy instrument? So over to you first, Daniel.
Well, I start with the second. I don't think it is a mantra. On the contrary, I think it is the narrative which underpins the proposals. It is also very concrete, because we are talking about sectors and areas of the economy which play a key role if we want to transform our society, if we want to transform the way we produce, the way we consume, the way we conduct our lives. We have to look at the energy, we have to look at the transport, we have to look at the circular economy, we have to look at the climate. So I think it's much more than a mantra. It's actually very concrete. And when the Commission is tabling its proposals, and we have the Circular Economy Action Plan adopted in March with 34 concrete actions dealing with sectors from product policy to IT to textiles, you see it's extremely concrete. And it goes beyond general nice words, and it becomes very instrumental and very operational. On the other question, I think it's a little bit linked to conditionality and how will the Green Deal interact, and whether it's only a part of it which is linked to climate. I think what the Commission is doing now, and I think it was very eloquently mentioned by all the speakers, in particular Sandrine and also Terry, is putting something which was missing. We had some emergency measures linked to the to the health crisis. We had the discussion on the MFF, where you have there of the 1.1 billion, a lot of elements which go into the EU budget, where you see already 25% of this budget will have to be linked to climate. So it's actually much more than just 40 billion. And then we have as a third element, this, you could call it fiscal stimulus, the possibility to go and to bring into the market injection measures which will have an impact on the countries, which will have an impact on the companies, and which will have an impact on the workers. And of course, the digital and the Green Deal underpin the whole strategy, together with the circular economy and with the sustainability. And they have already been doing so. When countries come with their national plans will have to respond to the country-specific recommendations which the Commission is putting forward in the semester. And you will see that in the semester, increasingly, we are making the links to the sustainability, to the climate policies. So I think, of course, the devil is in the detail. All these instruments will have now to be discussed, but behind the whole package of proposals, there is a very strong sustainability dimension. It will not be possible to finance sectors of the past, subsidies to sectors which are not going forward, if you are actually going to put in place these instruments. But of course, this is what the Commission proposes. Very much will depend on the discussions that we will have with the European Parliament and with the member states.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I have a question for you, Terry, and I'm also going to weave in a question we had from our audience. My question to you is, we're talking, which is maybe understandable, about this recovery package as if it's a fait accompli, but it's obviously, let's remind ourselves, still the state is a Commission proposal. So how confident are you, given the huge political debate that's been going on about the budget generally, of an agreement on the recovery package without too much delay, because obviously time is pressing? And I linked to that a question from Herman Mulder, Chair SDG Netherlands. I'm not quite sure what SDG is, forgive me, Herman. Your question is, you quote, some industries of the past are currently vital for certain economies. And how do you balance that or soften the pain? And that is maybe where there's a conflict between the Green Deal maybe and the recovery package, because the crisis has made it, the re-employment and creating employment even more urgent. And so to what extent will that need to create jobs in very short order, quote unquote, irrespective of the green impact, be a problem for the impact of the Green Deal? So in other words, how confident are you about the recovery package being approved by member states at the European Council, maybe in the weeks ahead? And this idea about there are some industries we can't just ignore, even if they are not as green as other industries.
Thank you. Good questions. I think, of course, it's at this moment a Commission proposal, but I think there is in general, this was something that was asked, the member states, the heads of government have asked the Commission to come forward with a plan. We've seen initiatives put forward by some member states and comments. I think there is a consensus that Europe needs to act. Europe needs to act, and it has to be significant. Now, I think there's also the discussions I mentioned earlier, what share of funding would be grants and what would be loans. That's an issue. And of course, it depends a little bit also on what kind of actors we're acting upon when we're supporting companies and private actors. Maybe loans are to a great extent more appropriate. Maybe there's other sectors that merit grants, and those will be the details, I think, at the overall size, and the share of grants and loans will be a crucial debate that will have to be done at the level of the heads of state, and obviously, for example, for my country, it will have to be our parliament that approves the budgetary commitment. So this is clear. Now, as regards there's industries that are not necessarily green, but I think there's I'm trying to struggle. I'm struggling a little bit to see what industry we would have that wouldn't have the potential to green. And we in Finland, in fact, we have a process of sectoral roadmaps that is taking place and concluded that there's results coming next week or the week after that. And all of the major sectors of industry have participated. We have in Finland, where we have an objective in the government to be climate neutral by 2035. This is a very ambitious objective, but all of the industries have taken part in this exercise, have taken a constructive approach, have looked into the technical, operational ways and means. How can they become climate neutral, and the conditions for that? And that it's proved, the results are that there are solutions for different sectors. And of course, that's where the public support comes in. I think we have to make sure that the public support, especially at the European level, has to be something that we can all support, like the investments in something that we are all have agreed into, delivering a climate neutral Europe by 2050, and the aim to have a digital economy. So I think there, the European support, we have to be very careful also for the acceptance of the citizens, that the way that we use the European resources is something that is clearly putting Europe forward.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I know, Sandrine, you want to come in. I also have a question for you, Sandrine. So do you want to respond quickly now to Terry's
No, why don't
point?
you tell me the question, and then I can do both at the same time, a double whammy.
Well, my question to you is, given your position in the Club of Rome, I just wonder whether there's concern about, the perfect being the enemy of the good. And I know we all want to be, everybody wants to be green these days, 100% green. But as I said, the crisis is such acuity that does one have to make, to use that terrible word, certain compromises, or is that anathema?
So I think there will always be compromises, and I've always, working in Brussels for the last 30 years, I've learned that compromising is important, but the question is, do you compromise down or up? And I think that that's the key. I think that, yes, we can all push the limits. The fact of the matter is, let's do two things. The first is, let's separate where we were pre-COVID. Our economies were broken. Everybody talks about this great business as usual. The fact is, most businesses were not functioning properly. They were not optimized. If you look at the aviation sector, we did not cost the journeys for aviation properly. We actually did not properly cost most of our polluting sectors. So we have got an economy that has been geared towards shareholder value, that has been geared towards profits rather than people, planet, and prosperity. Let's bring in another case, okay? This is the first generation that's going to make less than its parents. We've got the highest rate of suicide, and we've got the highest rate of mental disorder. Don't tell me that we are happy or doing well. So pre-COVID, we were in a very deep, difficult situation. Now, what does that mean for industry? I agree with Thierry. We have a number of sectoral roadmaps. We've got industries that are really moving in the right direction. The key now is to kickstart them in a difficult economic situation. And that, again, means that we need to look at some of the leadership that we've seen. Look at what's happening in Canada. In some cases, they've done some wrong things. But when it comes, for example, to the oil and gas sector, they've been very clear. We are not going to help the oil and gas sector. We're going to help you keep people employed. And the money is not going to go into shareholder profits. The first thing that we need to do coming out of COVID is ensure that we create jobs. So if we look at creating jobs, let's be very clear there as well. We know that we can multiply the job creation in green technologies by 5 to 10 times what they are in existing technologies. Whether it be regenerative agriculture and organic agriculture, or whether it be in new energy processes. So I think it's really important that we look at this. We also need to not just think about new capital. We have got a market that is running on perversities across the board. We have subsidies where we put a value on all the wrong things. We are helping oil and gas. We are helping, again, bad agricultural practices rather than good agricultural practices. As Thierry knows, because we started with the Fuel Quality Directive, one of the greatest instruments with the Fuel Quality Directive was that we put in place tax incentives to enable the oil and gas sector to transition from high sulfur fuels to low sulfur fuels. They said it was going to be impossible. That transition happened in 5 years. We can actually do a lot with shifting the way our market functions and making sure that people are kept in jobs if we focus on what's important. The taxonomy program, the sustainable finance program, the do no significant harm conditions that are actually included in this recovery plan is the way in which we can start to measure where the money should go alongside a really strong just transition plan and fund to enable those incumbents and also member states to really move forward in that way. And yes, exactly as Manipratra said in the beginning, we're going to have to think about border taxation. We're going to have to think that if we actually help these companies through this process on this important journey, which many of us know is possible. Look at the Energy Transition Commission also in the recent figures that have demonstrated that all the hard to abate sectors can move much faster than we think. But we are going to have to make sure that we don't then just import high polluting products that compete against our industries that have tried to do the right thing.
Well, to finish this part of the program, I'm going to ask a question to Abraham, and I'll also add on a question from our audience to you, Abraham. My question to you, Abraham, is that you referred in your opening remarks to global coordination, and by definition, both the health pandemic and the green debate are global issues, obviously, and they come together in a global way. But let's be candid, Abraham. There's a lot of geopolitics around at the moment, a lot of heated debate, and a lot of power politics being played out on the world stage against this backdrop of both the health and the green agendas. So how confident are you that the different regions of the world, the different power blocks of the world, frankly, can work together in an effective manner? And the question from a gentleman in the audience, Andrew Muir, CEO of Farpoint, is as follows, Abraham. If energy generation moves to 100% green, does it matter so much about reducing power consumption of equipment? Shouldn't we concentrate instead on reducing emissions from other sectors, such as transport, as Sandrine just mentioned? So over to you, Abraham.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sandrine. As I mentioned, I mean, you have rightly touched the 3 points I've mentioned. The greener ICT industry is essential. Because there's going to be millions of 5G base stations. Every base station have a power consumption. If we save like 20 to 30% of them of energy consumption, is a big deal. But of course, it's not all, because ICT industry is just one of the many industries. So that is why I mentioned ICT digital technology is actually an enabler for the other industry to be greener or to be more efficient. And as an example, I have been put on the transportation, on the electricity, and many other situations. Even the smart farm agriculture, there are opportunities. But it's as you said, the natural. I mean, the geopolitical uncertainty is sometimes I feel it's even tougher. I mean, it's more difficult than the ordinary natural disaster, because the uncertainty is even more. And of course, as I said, a global company, a global supply chain is facing great challenges. I mean, ahead of us, because there are political forces. They are trying to decoupling the supply chain, by motivated by whatever first reason. It's a unprecedented situation for a company like Huawei. I noticed that many other international companies share the same concern, the same challenge with us. And as I said, it's not easy, for Huawei. Nothing is easy. I mean, but we believe there is going to be a way out, but this kind of way out has to be supported by global coordination. We cannot do everything by our own. It's not practical, and it's not affordable as well. So there are uncertainty ahead of us, but I do want to take this opportunity to call the European policymakers, to pay a special attention about this European international players also has to face this, has to, to get the support to address the current challenge of, uncertainty of this global supply chain.
And then the question from Andrew, though, is quite a narrow question. Maybe you can't answer it, but if energy generation moves to 100% green, does it matter so much about reducing power consumption of equipment? Shouldn't we focus instead our attention, our efforts on reducing emissions from other sectors, such as transport? Do you have any views on that?
I mean, both. I mean, we cannot just leave either of them away.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, everybody on the panel, we're now going to move to the Have Your Say session. I'd like to thank you all. This is the end of our sort of classic traditional Q&A session. We're going to move over now to the Have Your Say, which is a bit more innovative part of the program. And I invite everybody watching and listening in to move to the Sessions tab on the left-hand side of your screen. And once you're in Sessions, click on the Have Your Say, and then we'll have the next part of our program with a whole new cast of characters as well. So see you in a very